This morning we are in the Cedar Creek room in the State House, taking a look at the case in here that we periodically rotate different exhibits through. Many times the exhibitor here is Howard Coffin, one of Vermont's preeminent Civil War historians, who has a really grand collection of all things Vermont Civil War as well as some national Civil War stuff. And we're lucky enough with this exhibit that's been up for a few months here that he's shared a little bit about the Gettysburg Address. We have a couple pieces in here. We have a copy of the World, which was a New York City newspaper. It's the November 20th, 1863 edition. And this edition printed a one-page piece on Abraham Lincoln's speech that he delivered that previous day during the dedication at the Gettysburg National Cemetery in Gettysburg. What's known as the Gettysburg Address text is here, as it was recorded by the World's reporter who was there that day, and it does contain, as part of the text, several interruptions by applause. And there's one myth that at the time the Gettysburg Address of the speech was poorly received, and this perhaps indicates that it was more than a myth than a reality, and that there is a number of interruptions for applause. Now, this paper shows a detailed look at of a map of the cemetery, and you can note that there is a section, the Vermont section, which is just off the center path, which is sort of just the center path coming down. It's the first larger one to the right, and it contains the remains of 60 Vermont soldiers who were killed at Gettysburg. Vermonters played a major role during the three-day battle at Gettysburg and have a pretty prominent place off the main corridor there in the cemetery at Gettysburg. A majority of those Vermonters perishing as part of the 2nd Vermont Brigade attack that broke the southern flank of Pickett's charge and really turned the wave of battle on the last day there. With this paper, we also have a portrait of Abraham Lincoln that also is owned by Mr. Coffin. And this portrait was discovered in Woodstock, Vermont, and it's by an unknown 19th century artist. He's done a little research. We've tried to help him do a little research and haven't been able to directly figure out exactly who did this painting or the exact time frame of it, but I know from conversations with him that this is a very important piece of his collection, and we're very pleased that he was willing to share it with us. So another really interesting little exhibit that we have here in the Cedar Creek room. If you happen to be in the building passing through, or if you're here for an event, or for any reason, I would encourage you to, as you're rolling through, appreciating everything we have here in the Cedar Creek room, to pop over to the corner and take a look at this. The newspaper article is really neat, and I think having the map of the cemetery from literally a day or two after it was dedicated is a really neat piece of history that we have here. So if you're here, stop by and take a look at it for a few minutes.
Hello, this is Representative Bill Canfield from Fairhaven. We have some guests at the State House today on the topic of tax and legalization of marijuana. And your name is?
My name is Elizabeth Stuyt. I'm a psychiatrist from Colorado.
All right. And what brings you here today?
Well, I actually am happy to be here. I do go around this country free of charge to talk to people, because what I'm trying to help people understand is what happens when you do this, when you actually commercialize this product and make it available for everyone. Because what I try and tell people in states that haven't started this yet, please wait until Colorado has had 10 years of experience, because we now have 5 years of experience, and what we're experiencing for many of the population is horrific. And that's what I want people to recognize, because the industry will be there telling you you're going to make a ton of money, you can use the money for all kinds of programs. That's what they told us in Colorado, and it's not happening. We are not seeing the money being used for all kinds of programs. The money is going to the industry and then to legislators who support the industry, but it's not coming to who needs it. And we have increased rates of addiction, we have increased rates of cannabis use disorder, increased rates of psychosis, increased rates of cannabis hyperemesis syndrome, and it's all related to this very high potency THC. You know, back in the Woodstock era, the THC was like 2%. Now, in Colorado, and here I'm sure it's the same thing, in the flower it can be up to 30%. I even heard a dispensary guy bragging about how he now has a plant that's 40% in the flower. But the concentrates are getting it up to 60 to almost 100% THC, which is very damaging to the brain. And when you commercialize it like you guys are planning on doing, you normalize it. So in Colorado, we have all these youth who think there's nothing wrong with it because it's safe, it's a medical product, and they wouldn't legalize it if it wasn't safe. And so now several of us physicians in Pueblo, Colorado, which our county commissioner has termed it the Napa Valley of Colorado, of cannabis, we have gone into the schools, and so they've been letting us come into the schools to talk to kids about drugs. And the kids' questions. So I talked to 247th graders for an hour talk, and the questions were, well, why is marijuana legal if it's not so safe? Well, I mean, this is from kids. And so now we have the vaping problem, and people are, that's another industry that's in it for the money. These people are not thinking about the people that are affected. And so the people that are going to be the most affected are people that have mental health issues, that already have addiction issues, that are going to develop addiction issues. This is not the answer for the opiate epidemic. This has been proven now. Initially there were studies coming out that's saying, the states that have legalized marijuana had decreased opiate overdose. That was true initially. But that research has been replicated over time, increasing for the last 3 years, and that is totally reversed. And so now not only has it not decreased, it's increased. And in Colorado, we see continuing increases in opiate overdose deaths, and we have every available marijuana available. And most people I treat who are heroin dependent or heroin use disorder, they're all smoking marijuana. People in my treatment program, I treat people in a very phenomenal program that doesn't exist anywhere else. It's a 90-day inpatient treatment program funded by the state of Colorado. I treat people there who have failed everything else, and so most of them are there for alcohol, heroin, or methamphetamine, but 95% of them are smoking marijuana. And what I see as the biggest problem is their marijuana, because the other drugs leave the brain a lot quicker. And so when people have been smoking marijuana up to admission, they're cognitively impaired, and I can demonstrate that with cognitive testing, and they don't get the program as well. And so we've seen decreased success rates in my program over time since we legalized in 2014. And it's very well correlated. We used to have an 80% success rate from the program, and we're down to like 53% success rate. And I'm seeing more and more people with cannabis use disorder as their primary drug. Up until 2016, it was only like 4% had cannabis use disorder as their primary drug of addiction. Now it's up to 14% where cannabis is the primary drug of addiction. And I see significant psychiatric issues, mostly very severe delusional stuff, that really affects people functioning. And the other thing I see a lot of is apathy, amotivational syndrome, which gets diagnosed as depression. And so these people are put on all kinds of antidepressants that don't help. And the reason is they're still smoking marijuana, and they have to get off the marijuana. So there's just many, many things. I could keep going on and on. We have a person here from Massachusetts who used to work in the industry, and she's experienced some of the stuff I've talked about.
Okay, so now we're going to hear from your name, please.
My name is Hassel, and I am a physical therapist who decided to go to work in the marijuana industry. I worked there for a year and a half in a Massachusetts marijuana dispensary as a bud tender. And the bud tender is a person behind the counter who makes the sales and recommendations and weighs the bud. I thought going into this that this was all about a harmless, natural plant. That is not the case. This is about a profit-driven industry that is producing an unnatural, addictive, harmful commodity. I didn't expect any of this. And what Dr. Stuyt said is very correct. What happens is I started consuming marijuana back in the 80s when it was 3% THC, and I thought it relaxed me and was good for me. Well, I went to work in the marijuana industry. I began consuming high THC bud that was 20 to 30% THC. But the real problem started when I was consuming the high THC concentrates, which are made with chemical extractors like butane and propane. So all you have are the crystals of the bud. That's, again, like she was saying, over 90% THC is what I consumed. And that was very harmful for my brain. I never used any other drugs but marijuana. However, after consuming originally the high THC and then the concentrates, I developed a severe cannabis use disorder having all 11 out of 11 characteristics. It was very serious. I didn't know what was wrong with me. I was having psychotic thoughts and feelings that were getting worse. They were getting extremely disturbing and incredibly bizarre, but I was too high to understand what was happening. So it brought me to the point where I was going to have a complete psychotic break or commit suicide. But fortunately, I was able to wake up to the harms and stop. That was the critical part. And I want for people in Vermont to know we have the commercialized, industrialized marijuana industry in Massachusetts, and no, it's not being regulated properly. There are microbial contaminations, there are pesticides and heavy metals. This is known across the country, but is not being really told to the public. People need to really think about what they want for their people and their children. I know that the money, people always point to the money as being important, but that's not important compared to people's health, and they need to understand the danger behind all of this.
Well, thank you. So as you Vermonters will understand, for us legislators to do our due diligence on this subject, we do need to hear from all sides. And I thank you two ladies for coming to Vermont and sharing your stories with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good morning. I'm Senator Phil Baruth from Chittenden County, and I just wanted to quickly tell you about one thing that I'm working hard on in the Senate this session. Last session we passed a waiting period bill for firearms, one that would require a 24-hour wait for handguns. And the intention behind that was to reduce suicides, but also homicides. Unfortunately, the governor vetoed that last year. Problematic because I think that leaves Vermont less safe than it might otherwise be. So some folks in the Senate and I are working on it again. We plan actually to come out with a stronger bill this year with a 48-hour waiting period. And we just had some researchers come in, the top researchers in the country, and they say that a waiting period like that might save up to 7% to 10% of suicide and somewhere between 17 and 20% of homicides. So a cooling off period for firearms, common sense measure, and we hope to get it to the governor's desk and then have him reevaluate and make a bigger, better decision this time around.
Hi, Representative Diane Lanford here. It is our third week back in session here in 2020. I guess it is into the fourth week. So I represent Addison 3, or one of the representatives for Addison 3, which is Ferrisburg, Virgins, Panton, Waltham, and Addison. This is my 12th session, and I serve on the House Appropriations Committee. So we're just got the budget adjustment, readjusted last year's budget, digging right now into the upcoming 21 budget right now is most on our plate of understanding what we have, what we need, how are we going to spend the taxpayers' money to their benefit in the next upcoming year. But today was also an interesting day for me because part of my budget work is within the area of DALE and Human Services. And today is it's Mental Health and Developmental Services Awareness Day. So there's lots of people here, which there are always lots of people here. So they invited me down to their organizational meeting, and I was surprised with an award, which was very touching. And both Representative Teresa Wood from Waterbury and myself received this advocacy award for our paying attention to this issue over the summer. So I know a lot of people, we are only in session until hopefully May, but a lot of the work happens outside of that. And so this recognition was for the time and effort of understanding what the potential changes that are happening and that will be happening in the world of developmental disabilities services. So just to give everybody an idea, not since the closure of Brandon in 1993 is there proposed this many different changes to that system. So it's a very large change in many areas. So we thought it would be very important for us to stay really engaged on this issue over the summer and attended many of the work group meetings. And as it develops, it's going to be years and years in the process, but being engaged with it now saves time and we can better serve Vermonters and each other. Not every legislator can be everywhere all the time. So this is my effort of engagement in that area to the extent that I do, or that we do, so that we can help each other to better understand it. So, today's a sunny day, and we have judiciary coming up in about 3 minutes, so I'm going to end it at that. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ann Pugh, Chair of the House Human Services Committee, and I'm from South Burlington, Vermont. And this is week 4 of the legislative session. Today, actually, when I'm speaking with you, it is Mental Health Advocacy Day. And what is particularly fun for me is that in my other life outside of the legislature, I teach at the University of Vermont in the Department of Social Work. And the number of graduates of our program who are in fact employed in community mental health centers and other agencies serving Vermonters is pretty amazing. And over 10 of them happen to be here today, and it was really fun to see how they are succeeding and how they are in fact implementing their education. So it was fun for me to do that. In other areas, in terms of the Committee on Human Services, we have begun working on a variety of bills, and I'm just going to give you a quick rundown, and in future segments I'll speak more specifically about them. One, as you all know, we have a demographic shift in Vermont, and we have more people in comparison to other states who are aging. And yet we have really nothing in law to sort of outline what it means to and how the state should assist Vermonters who are aging, who have specific needs, and at the same time how to build the capacity of businesses and communities to support elders who want to continue to work or volunteer and things like that. So we're looking at that and creating. We are also looking at a way, looking at contraception and contraception availability. Last year, the legislature passed legislation maintaining the right of all Vermonters for the full range of reproductive health care decisions, including abortion. Well, it really became important to our committee to put everything in place so that people didn't have to make what is for many a very, very hard and difficult decision. And so we are looking at evidence-based sexual education, as well as the availability of contraception to older youth as well as adults. So that's the second issue. The third issue that we are looking at addresses harm reduction and the opiate crisis and how to save lives, and that is looking at the non-prescription use of buprenorphine. Buprenorphine being one of the medications that has been that is proven to be an effective tool for people who want to and are able to get off of opiate addiction. And we are also looking at issues related to child protection and how to provide oversight of the system of how we protect children. But right now, and for the next couple of weeks, we'll be taking a deep dive into where the state is spending its money as we, as a legislature, begin to look at the budget for, believe it or not, fiscal year 2021. So, believe it or not, week 4, we're off and running, and I look forward to speaking with you again. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Rich Westman. I'm the senator from Lamoille, and I am on Health and Welfare Committee in the morning, and my afternoon committee is Appropriations. In my morning committee, we have been spending a fair amount of time on a vaping bill to eliminate flavors for vaping, and talking about menthol cigarettes and the elimination of menthol cigarettes and the ability to sell in Vermont. Vaping has become a very a problem amongst young people, and we're trying to get ahead of what the curve on that particular problem in addiction in our committee. My afternoon committee is Appropriations. We have just voted out the midterm adjustment to spending, the Budget Adjustment Act. It was pretty uncontroversial this year. And we just started taking testimony on next year's budget, the 2021 budget, which seems strange, but the way the calendar works, we will start the 2021 budget in July. And we just barely started testimony on that and a lot of the general government stuff. So that's kind of my days now, and we look forward to the session and getting into some really of the more difficult issues. And this was Mental Health Day at the State House, so the building was quite full. Thank you.
Hey, this is Representative Tom Stevens from Waterbury. I represent the Washington-Chittenden District, which is Waterbury, Bolton, Huntington, and Buell's-Gore. We've gotten off to a very fast start in the General Housing and Military Affairs Committee this year. We had some work that we had to finish from last year, specifically the Paid Family Medical Leave Insurance Bill and the Minimum Wage Bill, both of which we put into conference with the Senate right at the beginning of the year and spent 2 weeks negotiating, 1 week for each, and then voted it out on the floor, minimum wage and paid family leave out of the House last week. The paid family leave bill is now on the governor's desk, and as of this recording, he should be either signing it or vetoing it or letting it get into law without his signature sometime today or tomorrow at the very latest, I believe. The minimum wage bill is now in the Senate, and they need to vote on the conference report on that. For the minimum wage, we settled in on increasing the wage only over 2 years. The House had some questions last year and put in a very long 5-year, 6-year, 7-year plan of raising it to $15 an hour, which the Senate, I think, rightfully disagreed with. And so what we settled on was a 2-year raise, and then we'll revisit this again next year or the year after. But we have, we'll be raising the minimum wage to $11.75 next spring, next January, and then $12.55 in the January after that. And that, again, will rely on it passing the Senate and then getting signed into law by the governor. If he does veto either of these two bills, then we have to put together 100 votes to override the veto, which is about as raw as politics gets in this building, and we don't know if we'll be able to do that. And the leadership in our party in the House is working on that right now to try to make sure we have the votes to override the veto. If not, then this has to wait again. These two issues, which are very important to working Vermonters, will have to wait until next year to be dealt with and after the election. Other than that, I'm back to work on 2020 issues, one of which would be a joint resolution that apologizes to the populations affected by eugenics back in the 20s, 30s, 40s, whenever it was legal here in the state of Vermont. It's a very dark part of our history, very disturbing, actually. And while you can only say so much to, hey, that happened then, and that was something that was cutting edge back then, I think everybody always realized that eugenics was a questionable and dubious medical procedure, and we hurt quite a few people, a lot of them in Waterbury at the state hospital. And so we're contemplating a joint resolution that makes an apology to the peoples affected. We're also working on a homeless bill of rights, which will just try to take a little bit of the stigma off of people suffering from a period of homelessness. We're working on a handful of alcohol-related bills to try to make it easier for wineries and breweries to sell their product at their manufacturing facility. And we're working on housing bills because affordable housing in this state is incredibly needed, deeply, deeply needed. And so we're trying to work on policy and trying to work on funding for that. So it's been pretty chock full. We hit the ground running, and it's going to be a very, very busy biennium for us, and not just in general housing, military affairs, but I think in the General Assembly as a rule. So thanks for listening.